All right, let's do this. I'm going to show you guys how to make Snapchat Geofilter, hopefully a better version than the one we were kind of rushed through the other day, but should take about the same amount of time. So first thing you're going to want to do is go to snapchat.com/create. Again, you don't have to do this. This is just how you download a template if you want to work from a template, but you can definitely start from scratch. So once you're here, we're going to be making community filters, but don't click that. We're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom for community guidelines. Or actually do support. Support will work better. Um, and we're going to go ahead and type in Geofilter. Can't type. And I believe it's the top one, create community filters. These are just guidelines of why things get denied. You can read all this if you want to, but we're not going to be working with that right now. We're going to go over here to community filter submission guidelines. So right over there too. And then down here is where you can find your templates for Photoshop and Illustrator. A lot of people think Illustrator is better for making designs like this, which it probably is, but I learned it with Photoshop, and that's the way I'm going to teach it to you guys today. So go ahead and download that. It should take a couple seconds. And this is about the finished product. When I was testing it earlier, I made one that looked kind of like this. I'm going to make something similar to that, but a little bit more fleshed out. I'm going to be working with Jackson, Mississippi as the city that I chose. Okay, so once it loaded, Photoshop should look something like this. I'll go ahead and reset my essentials so my Photoshop will look exactly like yours. So I'm going to go ahead and close out these panels over here since I don't really need them. But I do want the layers one. So we're not going to be working with buffers. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. We're not going to be working with these filters, so I'm going to delete that. But we do want that background, but I'm going to go ahead and hide it for now. Okay, so the first thing you want to do, go over here to the type tool. This will automatically make a new layer. Yours are probably going to be on some default Photoshop font like that. So click Jackson. Yours will probably be black. This is just the colors I was using earlier. So I'm kind of using this midnight bluish color, which I kind of like. And the font I'm going to be using is a font called Hot Pizza, which I just downloaded from defont.com. So if you just Google Hot Pizza font, you should be able to find it, easily download it to your computer, stuff like that. This is actually the logo font typeface that's used for Pizza Hut, which I really like, and I think it's a nice looking font. So I'm going to use Command T to go ahead and make that a little bit bigger, stretch it out with Command T. You can also just type in a number at the top. Go ahead and center that with those little guidelines there. So this is the size that Photoshop needs for a geofilter to be made. These little guidelines help for like iPhone 10s with that little notch. These help guide and stuff like that. So you'll want your filter to be kind of directly under that light blue line, right around the corner, or if you're doing it obviously in the bottom or middle, you can center it too. And I think for this filter, I am actually going to center mine. So if your font started off black like mine, I'm going back to the type tool to select it. If your font started off black, looking like something like this, you just go up here to click the tool, okay, and that's what you use to change colors. I'm gonna do it one more time to go back to that midnight bluish color, do something kind of like that. And next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and rasterize this type. So what rasterizing does is it changes it from a type that you can actually like edit on and like work with to a type that is just an image. So that's kind of hard to explain, but all you really need to do is come up here. If you're selected on the type, press the check mark, and you'll know it worked if your little FX in the middle shows up because it wasn't highlighted earlier. So click FX, and I'm going to go ahead and add a stroke to this. So a stroke is just the border outside of text. I'm sure a lot of you guys know that. You can kind of see that faint. I'm just zooming in with Command plus. That faint little white outline right there. I'm gonna go ahead and minimize that. I'm gonna make that a little bit bigger. I'm gonna do, I think I did 23 when I was testing this out, but I think that's a little bit too thick for me. I'm gonna do 18. Yeah, sounds about right. Position outside, blend mode normal. Don't worry so much about these things. They can get really confusing and tedious. But for now, just know that outside is what we're going to be using. I'm going to do white, but obviously you guys can do this with any colors or type that you want. Notice it's not going to get everything. It's like missing those little parts within the C and the little K, but I actually kind of like that, so I'm going to keep it as it is. Next, I'm going to add a bevel and emboss. So if you see this one, effects, bevel and emboss, click that. And I already have my preferences set from when I was doing this earlier, so yours isn't going to look like this. But I'm going to do an inner bevel. So a bevel is just kind of what gives it that 3D look. Emboss is what kind of gives it a smoother look, if that makes any sense, kind of like it was like rubbed upon or something like that. But I'm going to go ahead and do an inner bevel. The technique is going to be smooth, so it's just going to look kind of have that faint 3D look to it. My depth is set at 220. You can set that to whatever you want to. Depth doesn't really look that different depending on it, so I'll stick with 220. Size does make a big difference though, so how big or small you want this kind of 3D letters to look, almost like it's like fridge magnets. I'm going to stay something low. I'm at 7 right now, and I definitely want it to be really soft, so I'm going to increase that to 12. Angle is just where that reflection is on, so right now I have it on the right, but I can move it to whichever spot I want to. I actually kind of liked it on the right. I'll stick with that one. I think that one looks good. That's -16. Highlight mode's normal with white. Shadow mode, I'm going to make normal too. I have it as a kind of a purple right now, but I'm going to change it to maybe a dark green or something like that, just to get a little bit of color in there. It's not going to look that much different to you guys though. And I actually don't really love this midnight color. I'm going to try to make it a little bit more, yeah, like I said, there's light blue is the color I selected earlier. You can change that. I'm going to do kind of something in the middle. Maybe. I'm playing around with this. Maybe I'll do something green. Whenever you try to do a city, Snapchat really likes it if the colors or the themes represent something impactful to that city. So for Jackson, I was doing this kind of blue because it reminds me of like the Mississippi River and stuff like that. But obviously, it can just be something artistic. It doesn't have to be a direct relation to something you've worked with before. So I kind of like that periwinkle-ish color. I think that's fine. Also, one thing I should mention with Snapchat is definitely you cannot use like any logos or trademark stuff. Everything has to be original artwork that you design yourself. I'm going to see how this looks with the gradient. The gradient, if you guys remember, is kind of transitioning from one color to the other. So I can kind of do this purplish, bluish color. I'll do something like that. And I kind of want to see what it looks like if I go into something greenish. I'll click OK. And I'm going to get rid of my color overlay. So that's what my gradient looks like. Don't love it. But if I turn down the opacity, you can kind of play around with it to something that pleases you. Still don't love that green. Maybe I'll make the green a light blue. There we go. We're kind of getting something that looks kind of good now. And my scale is set at 100%, but obviously you can play with that to what you want. I'll leave it right there at 96. And you can add stuff like patterns and stuff, but just be careful not to add too much, because once you're adding too much, it's kind of like, okay, this is just, it looks pretty, but there's too much going on. Which I kind of like that water texture, so I might minimize that a little bit. Scale it up, kind of getting a soft, ever so subtle, watery look to it. I'm actually going to shrink my stroke down a little bit. Something more like, oh, I don't know. I'll go with 10. No, I won't. I'll go with 15. Yeah, that looks fine. And then, yeah, so these are all the effects I'm going to add. Obviously, you can add much more. You can add shadows and inner glows, outer glows, drop shadows, stuff like that. I would advise against a drop shadow. Drop shadow is just obviously, remember the little black shadow that's in the background. I'm not sure. Yeah, there's mine. It was far off centered. Snapchat doesn't really like drop shadows. Snapchat doesn't really like all these hyper pixelated stuff that you have to make with drop shadows. They kind of prefer the more the more kind of vector artistic style look. But if you want to be bold, you can try. I know of some have worked with that. But I'm going to go ahead and keep it as it is. I'm going to use Command-0 to resize this. So now I have my little Jackson, Mississippi logo. I'm going to put it, I said I was going to put it in the center, but I might have lied. I don't love it there. So yeah, Snapchat does really like it if, like, I'm gonna grab the ellipsis tool. This is just me kind of improvising here for a second. I might put like a orange ellipsis or something in the back. Snapchat really likes having these little design flares added to your artwork to make it kind of stand out. Um, Obviously, it's not required. Every filter has different things that make it good. I should be able to select, copy these effects and put it onto the ellipsis here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the gradient on that one. But yeah, you can kind of, like I said, you can play around with it however you want to. If you think a shape would look all right in the background, or if you don't want to, no one's forcing you to. You can play with it however you want to. I kind of like that, but I'm not sure. Let me get rid of the pattern. I'm going to click on the pattern. I'm going to turn down the opacity. Something like, maybe I'll do another different kind of pattern. Let's see what options they have. That one's okay. I think actually I'm just going to not do the pattern. So I'm just going to have the text that says Jackson, but you can play with that however you want to. You can test it with the background to see what it looks like. So I think it looks fine. I actually really like this one. And make sure you hide the background when you export it. So then go to File. There's many ways to do that. You can do export, but I do save as. So I'm going to do is File, Save As. I always call my geofilters the name they are. I'm going to save it to my desktop. I'm going to save it once as a Photoshop file. So it should pop up over here. Yeah, Jackson PSD. And I'm also going to save it as a PNG. That's the format that you need to import files into Photoshop as. So I'm going to go over here, PNG, do save. Jackson PNG RDS. That's just because of the one that I was doing earlier in test. So I'll go ahead and replace that. And do OK. And then it should appear over here. Oh, it actually saved as a copy, so that's fine too. So this is what it looks like. You'll know if it worked. If you're on a Mac, it should have this kind of grayish background. That just means there's nothing behind there. It'll turn to black if you do full screen. So now what we're going to do is go back over to Snapchat, the website. Like I said, you'll probably need to log in with your own account for this kind of thing. But just for my account, I'm going to go ahead and go to snapchat.com/create. And community filters, submit now. Okay, so when I was doing this earlier, I was already working with a location. It's going to save your progress of what you're at, but I'm going to go back to select type. This is the screen you guys should see. Continue, make a geofilter. This is where you upload your design. I'm going to do this Jackson copy one. Open, and there it is, centered on the page. Obviously, like, yeah, it says buffer zones, iPhone X. That's why these areas are grayed out. I'm going to do continue. This is where you choose your location. So if I was doing Jackson, Mississippi, it's already pre-selected because that's the city I was working on. But if I did a random city, if I did like Norman, it's not going to have that green box around it. That's just the city I was already working with. But you can draw your green box by clicking this reset fence. You might not have to press that, but you can draw your green box around the city that you're working with. Try to get as accurately as you can to fit in within the borders of the city. Obviously, you're not going to get every little street, but try something that works. But the reason Jackson was already pre-made for me is because I did what's called a featured city. So featured cities are more likely to get filters just because they're in high demand according to Snapchat. And Jackson I saw was one of them, so that's why I chose it. So I'm going to click it. And here's Jackson, Mississippi. Let me zoom out for a second just to check something. Yep, there it is right there in Mississippi. I was checking. I didn't know Jackson actually went through the Mississippi River, and it looks like it doesn't, but it's not that big a deal. But you can kind of see this website can take a little bit to load just because you're working with so much cities. It can be kind of hard to navigate around. But there's my Jackson. It's already pre-selected according to the Snapchat fence. So I'm going to go, I'm fine with that. I'm going to click continue. And this is where I go ahead and type in my name, which is Austin, and then leave about a 1-sentence reply of what this city is, why it's meaningful to you, why you made a filter for it. So Jackson is a featured city in Mississippi that I enjoy driving through on road trips with my family. You can make it a personal thing like that. You can make it just if you grew up in the city, you can explain that. It doesn't even have to be that personal. You can just explain you thought the filter looked cool, you thought the area looked cool, or if there was nothing there before. Give your own description, whatever you want to. These are just what works for me. Go ahead and submit. And you should get a celebration screen. It's going to take a couple seconds. Thank you. Perfect. So you submitted your filter. You can obviously submit more. I'm going to go to my geofilters. Yours should probably only have one, or if you've done this before, some show up there. But this is where you can track your geofilters. You can see all the ones that I made. There's that failed Denton one. But lots of these, as you can see, are rejected. And you're going to be frustrated because Snapchat doesn't like email you saying why things are rejected. Like this one for Oklahoma City, I thought was really good, but Snapchat disagrees. But since they get such a high volume of this, they don't have time to specifically respond to why each one is bad. Some you can look back at and say like, okay, maybe that one wasn't the best or something like that. But some that you could really believe in, like this one I made for the library or Arcadia or Glen Arbor, several ones I've made just get denied, and you're not going to get a reason for that, and that's okay. So you can click on your little filter, see it's in review. It should take anywhere from a couple of days to maybe a week or two for Snapchat to respond to you and tell you if it got activated or not. And sometimes it can be as simple as just positioning the filter to a different location. Like for instance, this one got rejected, this one got rejected, but this one got accepted. And the only thing I changed was I moved the filter down a couple inches. If you guys see, like these two look almost identical, but on this rejected one, there was a pixel that was out of place, just one pixel right there that was covering the screen, and I removed it, and then it got accepted. So you can always just try resubmitting your artwork if you think there's something like that that's a technical error you did. But in most cases, you can look back and say, okay, that art direction probably wasn't very good, and that's why they didn't do it. So yeah, that's an easy guide on how you make your Snapchat filters. It's really straightforward, and I hope you guys submit stuff and are successful. So yeah, that is